I'm going to share with you one of the greatest signs of maturity, but I hope you're not offended by it. Be sure to stick around to the very end of this video to take part in Shout Out Trivia. Today we're going to talk about something that has been in short supply in the past decade and something that has been in plentiful supply this past decade. But before we get there, I need you to do me two favors. First, go hit like on this video and then let me know what is something that you always have in supply around your house. You never let it run out. Let me know in the comment section below and let's get that conversation started. I love the book of Proverbs. I do my best to read a chapter of Proverbs every single day of my life. I think wisdom is that important. Proverbs has 31 chapters, so I read the chapter that corresponds to the day of the month. On the day that this video is released, September 1st, I will have read Proverbs chapter 1. You might ask, isn't that pretty repetitive? Yes, I need that repetition. I need a wisdom infusion every single day. You should try it for a month. Whatever day that it is, you should start reading that chapter of the book of Proverbs. Let me tell you, you will not regret it. So, what's in such short supply these days? Wisdom. And what's in such great supply? Being offended.
How dare you!
Though it feels like we are in a Category 5 hurricane of being offended in 2020 America, being offended is not something new. We just seem to give it much more weight these days. Let's see what Solomon, the wisest king to ever live, says about being offended. Proverbs 19:11 says, "A person's insight gives him patience, and his virtue is to overlook offense." Wow, this verse is completely countercultural. The way the world works today, this verse could be rewritten like this. A person's personal truth gives him rage, and his offense is his virtue. But we know this is not wisdom. That's foolishness. So what is Solomon teaching us in this proverb? Let's start with the second half. His virtue is to overlook an offense. It is not virtuous to be offended. The opposite is true. It's virtuous to overlook an offense. Here's the deal. You and I, we will be offended. Honestly, offensive things happen every single day. People are crazy and mean. I mean, that's Twitter's entire business model. But having something offensive happen and taking that offense personally are two different things. A major sign of maturity is your ability not to take things personally, to not be easily offended. But we'll talk more on that later. The bottom line is this: it is wise and to your benefit to not be easily offended. Now let's look at the first half of the proverb. A person's insight gives him patience. How are the two halves of this proverb connected? Well, a mature person needs patience to deal with those who are less mature, right? Either by inexperience or by personal choice. An immature person is not mature. And while they need to be brought up to a higher level of maturity, it's actually the role of the more mature person to lead them to maturity in a steady, patient manner. It takes wisdom, or insight, as this proverb says, for the more mature person to take time to lead an immature person to maturity. The wise, mature person has enough insight to remember that they haven't always been this mature, and it was patient people in their lives that led them to become the mature person that they are today. A person's insight gives him patience, and his virtue is to overlook an offense. So what does this mean for us practically? It means that we can't buy into our culture's idea that it is virtuous to be offended. It is not. God calls that vice. Being offended is about matching your perceived insult with an equal amount of outrage. God has not called us to rage. He has called us to love one another and turning the other cheek. Before we keep going, let me go ahead and handle an objection that you may have. You may be thinking, Wait, if I do this, does that mean that we let everything slide? Aren't there things in life that we should be offended by? We should not be letting everything slide, and yes, there are things that should offend us. This proverb isn't telling us to overlook egregious wrongs, but to overlook things that aren't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. If someone says something off the cuff that rubs you the wrong way, don't let it fester. Overlook it. If someone cuts you off in traffic, don't tailgate them like a maniac. Overlook it. These are minor things. Overlook them. The only person you are hurting by dwelling on those things is you. Let them go. Don't let people live rent-free in your head. Are there things that we shouldn't overlook? Of course. God was so offended by our sin and our rebellion that he couldn't let it go. That's why Jesus came, to take the punishment for that offense. There are things that should offend us. True injustice, evil in our culture, corruption among our leaders, and many more things. You should be offended by these things, and you should work to correct them. But here's the key. You don't answer an offense with another offense. You don't respond to evil with more evil. That is not God's way. As Jesus followers, we are not to engage that way. We have a much higher calling. Matter of fact, the Apostle Paul said it like this: never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see that you are honorable. Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. Dear friends, never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God. For the scriptures say, I will take revenge. I will pay them back, says the Lord. Instead, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals of shame on their heads. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. When you are offended, conquer that evil with good. Do good things when you're offended. Don't write a passive-aggressive social media post. Don't make a scene. Don't burn things down literally or figuratively. Do good. That's the only way that evil is conquered. Let's take this all the way back to the Roman Empire. When Christians were being hunted and killed as sport, did they start an insurgency to overthrow the Roman Empire that was trying to snuff them out? Nope. They didn't repay evil with more evil. They did things in such a way that everyone saw that they were honorable. They literally conquered evil with good. Today, the Roman Empire is a brief moment in history, and the church is stronger than ever. The Colosseum is no longer a place of punishment, but a tourist attraction. The symbol of everything evil has been conquered by the symbol of everything good. Hey, I hope you were encouraged by this video. If you were, would you consider sharing it? And be sure that you subscribe so that you can see the next video when it launches on Tuesday. Before we end, a shout out to my dad for getting last week's trivia question correct. Paul was traveling to Damascus when he had a life-changing encounter with Jesus. Now for this week's question. What was the name of the Roman emperor that officially ended state-sponsored persecution of Christianity? Now, this question is definitely harder than previous weeks, but I think you guys can do it. Let me know in the comments below, and you could get a shout out in next week's video. See you next Tuesday. Grace and peace.